This meeting is being recorded.
Remembered. All right, let's begin with a chant. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening, everyone. So we're going to start with verse 9 of chapter 1 of the Svetasvatara Upanishad. And we have a couple of different translations here. So in the Swami Prabhavananda version, well, let's just read verse 8 as a review. In verse 8,
we had only read 6 verses before.
Oh, did we only do 6?
Yes.
Oh.
We stopped at 7.
Oh, yeah, that's, well, we talked about the wheel, though. The wheel has to, yeah, the wheel with all its spokes and its its rim, right. And its, yeah. And I think that was, let's see.
Are we on page 176?
Well, the different editions of the book have different page numbers, so that makes it very awkward. I have a very old edition, so it probably doesn't matter.
My 7th paragraph verse is mind and matter, master and servant. Is that what you have?
Yeah, that's actually verse 9.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, because verses 5, 6, and 7 were, I think, combined into one.
Got it. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the previous one was the Lord's, number 8 was the Lord supports this universe, which is made up of the perishable and the imperishable, the manifest and the unmanifest. The individual soul, forgetful of the Lord, attaches itself to pleasure and thus is bound. When it comes to the Lord, it is freed from all its fetters. In other words, when the individual soul comes to the Lord, not in the sense of when we talk about the Lord, it almost sounds like that in the way the English goes. And the other translations are pretty similar. I have another translation here. I think I emailed this set of translations to you, so you'd have the original Sanskrit and sometimes there's word for word, but not always. All right, so it says the Lord supports all this, which is a combination of the mutable and the immutable, the manifest and the unmanifest. And the soul, not being the Lord, is bound because of his being an enjoyer. By knowing God, the soul is freed from all fetters. So this is just the basic idea that the difference between the Lord and the individual soul is that the individual soul has forgotten its true nature and feels that it's bound by being in the world and being distracted by all the things in the world. And the Lord can know about the world, in fact, created the world and is in the world, but is not affected by it. It is not forgetful of it. So the Lord, usually in this particular Upanishad, is referred to by either Shiva or Hara or Rudra. The Supreme Lord is always conscious of his existence and is not bound by the creation that he himself creates. All right, so now then on to verse 9. And so in the Prabhavananda version, it reads, mind and matter, master and servant, both have existed from beginningless time. The Maya which unites them has also existed from beginningless time. When all three, mind, matter, and Maya, are known as one with Brahman, then it is realized that the self is infinite and has no part in action. Then it is revealed that the self is all. Now, this is a little bit different. Translators do these things a little differently. And so I'm going to read you another one, which I emailed out. There are two unborn ones, the knowing and the unknowing. So that might be mind and matter. And the mind would be knowing, and the matter would be unknowing. The one all-powerful, the other powerless. Indeed, there is another, one who is unborn, connected with the enjoyer and the objects of enjoyment. And there is the infinite self of universal form, non-active. When one finds out this triad, that is Brahman. So it's talking about a threefold nature of Brahman. And there are various ways to translate some of these Sanskrit words. And I'm not going to dwell a lot on individual Sanskrit words, but just to give you a flavor and to clarify what the meaning might be, we'll look at a little bit of this. And one thing that we need to remember is that the world that we experience is a world that is experienced through our senses and interpreted by our minds. And so we don't really know a thing. We just know our impression of a thing through the senses and the mind's interpretation of that, depending on how the mind processes all that information. So it's more a matter of knowing how we know something rather than its actual essence, because its actual essence is pure consciousness, but of course we don't see it that way. So what exactly are these terms in this particular sloka meaning? The two unborn ones, the knowing and the unknowing. In this one, it's given two possible variations, mind and matter, or master and servant. So what does that really mean? Well, the master and servant, that would be the Lord and the individual jiva. And mind and matter, that would be consciousness perceiving the world appearance. Now, the terms jna and ajna sometimes could be interpreted as knowing and unknowing. But in some sense, the word jna, which is the first part of the word jnana, can mean all-knowing. So that would refer to Brahman, or in this case, Shiva or Hara, the Lord, the personal absolute. In this particular kind of Shaivism, the Brahman also exists as the personal God, unlike in Advaita Vedanta, where that's a kind of a step down, you could say, from Brahman, is the manifestation of the personal God. So, and then the unknowing doesn't necessarily mean insentient. Now, of course, in some sense, matter is not insentient, as we've discussed in earlier talks. Matter has a kind of sentiency. It knows where down is. It can absorb radiation and radiate things back, depending on what kind of radiation it gets. There's all sorts of sentiency in matter, and matter is energy, and they both come from the pure consciousness of Brahman. So we shouldn't think of matter as being really insentient or not knowing, but it's obviously a different level of knowing than a living being would be. Yeah. Is that a question or is this just noise in the background?
Hmm.
Is this noise in the background? All right.
Jay, you might want to mute yourself.
Jay, did you think that we were having a meeting last Saturday at 7:30? Did you try to?
I thought that was a meeting at 2:30.
Yeah,
so
2:30. Yeah, we did have a meeting at 2:30. You didn't.
I didn't see anybody there. So what
Oh,
happened?
yeah,
So I
2:30 we
asked
were there.
eventually,
Huh.
Swamiji, namaste. Eventually today I find that I was talking about, eventually someone said that, then I see that you sent an email. I didn't see your email. But I saw Jeffrey's email. Jeffrey said 7:30 you have the class for Svetasvatara Upanishad 2, you know. So I
Yeah,
just
that's
logged in
Saturday.
7:30.
Saturdays at 2:30 and Wednesdays are at 7:30. So
Okay, so I'll go in Wednesday, Saturday. Thank you.
yeah, okay. And we may not keep up this two times a week deal, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so what is it that joins them together? In some sense, just in a normal psychological sense, we can think of it as the knower, the known, and the process of knowing. That would be a triad or a way of thinking of this. So in other words, Brahman is being said to be a triad made up of the knower, the known, and the process of knowing. Another way that some commentators have put it is mind, matter, and Maya. But it just depends on how you define Maya. And of course, in Shaivism, it's a little bit different. It's not a veiling of ignorance as much as it is a power to manifest, So it's consciousness and its power that are not really separable. And it's the process of that consciousness being able to produce an experience. Or now the word enjoy is let's see, where is that word? Yeah, okay. So in some translations, it talks about the individual soul being an enjoyer. That was in verse 8. We had that. And then also in verse 9, they're connected with the enjoyer and the objects of enjoyment is this third process. And so that would be the power of consciousness to connect you to things. It's interesting that the word for enjoyer that's being translated here is really more aligned with the idea of enjoying food. That's really the usual interpretation of it in most places in scriptures, is that it's has to do with the enjoyment of food. Its root word is bhuj, like our bhog. You know, we talk about the bhog, the offering of the food. And so it's the enjoyment of the food. And so it's not just pleasure of any particular thing. It's more the enjoyment of food and drink. And so this is the subtleties of some of the words in this particular shloka. Now, of course, people that are in the Sankhya school of philosophy might try to make it Prakriti, but that doesn't quite fit because it's talking about these all being connected as one, and in Sankhya they're completely separate. And it's not quite the same as Advaita Vedanta, but I think a little closer, in that Advaita Vedanta still has Brahman and its power, Maya, And so that's really very close to this idea. Certainly the way Sri Ramakrishna would describe the connection of Brahman and Maya. Okay, one way to interpret this is called Devatma Shakti, the effulgence self power of creation. And so that's what joins the individual soul and the source of that, which is the Lord. So the Lord is the creator and the individual soul is the enjoyer. And it's this Devatma Shakti, this power to create, that is the one that joins it. And so this is said to be a triad. It's interesting that seems like several different traditions, spiritual traditions, talk about a triad. And we have lots of triads. Of course, we have the three gunas as well, and we have Satchidananda, and we have infinite, undivided, and unchanging. So there are lots of threes that seem to be descriptions of the nature of Brahman, or the nature of the universe, or the nature of the reality. So it's this impelling power of consciousness that sets everything into motion, you could say. And so in one sense, you could say that Shiva represents the absolute subjectivity, the one subject, and the Jiva being consciousness tainted with the limitations of objectivity. So it's still a subject, but it's tainted with the limitations of objectivity. And so it's not as free as Ishvara, or the Lord. All right, so the idea here, of course, is that that we're going to see as we go on, is that in order for the jiva to become aware of its true self, it has to divest itself of this veil of ignorance. So it still sounds a lot like Advaita Vedanta. It needs to realize its identity with this unbounded self. And when all is known as Brahman, then this triple distinction of subject, object, and their relationship melts into pure oneness, and the absolute alone remains. So we can think of this as a subject, object in the process of knowing. That's in our normal, everyday 21st century language. That's probably the closest thing to a correct understanding of this particular verse. And then it says, when all three are known as one with Brahman, then it is realized that the self is infinite and has no part in action. Then it is revealed that the self is all, because it's one with Brahman, which is all. And so, as we've talked many times, the original, if you don't see things in oneness, then you've split them. And the original split is subject and object. And so you have two things. You've got the subject, which experiences objects. And then, of course, you have to have a process that connects the two. And we normally think of that process as just the process of perception, or the process of knowing. All right, so going on to verse 10, we have matter is perishable. The Lord, the destroyer of ignorance, is imperishable or immortal. He is the one God, the Lord of the perishable and of all souls. By meditating on him, by uniting oneself with him, by identifying oneself with him, one ceases to be ignorant. And so the idea here again is that the Lord has created all this and become all this, but the part that we are, the individual jiva, has an ignorance to its true nature. It's not all-knowing. It knows the world through the senses, but that's a very limited kind of knowing. And so we want to identify with the Lord himself, who is all-knowing and knows all. So that's the essence of this particular slogan. Now let's see if I have some interesting notes on this. Let's see. All right, so as again, a common distinction about, say, Brahman and the world of appearance of Maya is that the world of appearance is temporary. It's not permanent. And so it's not completely unreal, but it has no permanent reality. And so it's perishable. And so it's not just matter that's perishable, it's this whole phenomenal universe, all the various activities and forms of energy and so forth that are happening in the world of Maya are perishable because they change all the time. And so that's, I think, what we mean here by matter is perishable. Let's see, let's look at another translation, the one that I emailed to you. What is perishable is the pradna, or primary matter. What is immortal and imperishable is Hara, the Lord. Over both the perishable and the soul, the one God rules. By meditating on him, by uniting with him, by reflecting on his being more and more, there is complete cessation from the illusion of the world. So you want to identify with the source before it splits into subject and object in the process of knowing. And it doesn't really matter what you call it, but that's the process that we need to go through. Let's see. All right, I think we can go on to number 11. No God and all fetters will be loosed. Should be loosened, I think, but anyway. Ignorance will vanish. Birth, death, and rebirth will be no more. Meditate upon him and transcend physical consciousness. Thus will you reach union with the Lord of the universe. Thus you will become identified with him who is one without a second. In him, all your desires will find fulfillment. Now, we find in this Upanishad a very interesting aspect that might seem contradictory to some people, but to those of us in the Ramakrishna tradition, we find it quite ordinary or usual, because we're going to see that he's going to recommend the power, the path of devotion, being devoted to a personal identified God, being identified with Ishvara, with Shiva, with Hara, depending on the particular sentence. It seems to fluctuate back and forth. And yet you will become one with the Lord. So it's not dualistic in the sense that you're going to be worshiping a personal deity that you won't be coming one with, that you're simply going to be worshiping eternally, but that you will eventually be identified with them, the one without a second. And then all your desires will be fulfilled. So again, the fulfillment of desires means either there are no desires, so they're fulfilled because there aren't any, or they're actually fulfilled. That'd be two ways of looking at it. So, all right, so let's look at this other translation. By knowing God, there is a falling off of all fetters. When by suffering, when the sufferings are destroyed, there is a cessation of birth and death. By meditating on him, there is the third state, on the dissolution of the body, universal lordship, being alone, his desire is fulfilled. All right, so the first thing, the process of knowing, is the falling off of all fetters, and which we also saw in this other translation, know God and all fetters will be loosed. So we need to know what these fetters are. He doesn't list them, but they're listed in other scriptures at other times. So we probably can get a pretty good idea of what these fetters are. And one enumeration, which actually predates this particular Upanishad, lists them as hatred, shame, fear, suspicion, or distrust or hesitation, arrogance of family or ancestry, and concern over proper conduct, and a sense of superiority based on caste, and a disgust or secrecy. So we can just see how each of these are fetters to our spiritual progress. Remember, the goal is to identify ourselves with the one Lord, the one who predates this split into subject and object. And so if we feel the sense of hatred, then there's already a sense of dualism. You're separate from whatever it is that you hate. And so you're not getting back to that oneness. And so hatred is one of those fetters that we have to let go of. Then shame. Well, again, that's you're feeling separate from, you're feeling judged. You feel that other people are separate from you, and they are feeling that you have done something wrong. And so you've got this shame about your behavior. And so this is feeling as an individual again, and that takes you away from this identity of being one with Brahman, or one with Shiva, or one with the Lord. Fear. If we have the fear of something, then there has to be a something else. And you can't think of it as part of yourself and fear it. Once you know that it's part of yourself, then you have no fear. And so Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna both, of course, emphasize this idea that fear falls away when you realize your oneness with all beings. There can't be any fear if you realize your oneness with all beings, and that you are an eternal being, that you are one with the infinite, undivided, unchanging Lord. Because this body, if there's a threat to the body or the mind, that's inconsequential, because that's not your true reality. That's only a temporary manifestation, and we're not supposed to get attached to the temporary manifestation. And so a threat to the current body and mind should not disturb us. And so that's one of the fetters. All right, suspicion or distrust. Again, if you're suspicious, it means you're suspicious of somebody. You're suspicious of what it is they're doing. You feel that they're somehow against you, that they don't like you. So all of these kinds of feelings are feelings of separateness from other beings. And arrogance of family or ancestry. And of course, there's a lot of that that goes along, and it's not just, I mean, people think this might just be referring to the Indian caste system, but that's, and there's another whole fetter about the superiority based on caste, but they kind of go together, family and ancestry and caste. But those things exist in all the societies. All the societies had various social structures, and there are various movies and plays and novels and so forth written about how people had to overcome social objections as they rose up the ladder, you could say, and how people that had, let's say, been rich or so forth for a long time, the old money, they would resent people who were newly rich. So this happened in the Industrial Revolution a lot, because the old money would have been more aristocratic, you see. they got their money by being the lords of big landowning establishments. But then with the Industrial Revolution, some people were able to rise up to prominence through their ingenuity and hard work and inventions and so forth. And so then they became quite wealthy. But a lot of times the old money didn't resented the new money. They didn't feel that they were really up to their standards. Was it in Auntie Mame where they the family had just become wealthy and moved into this wealthy neighborhood, and their name was Upsons, and so they named their plantation Upsons Downs, something like that. Anyway, there's and then of course we have racial equality that we've seen a lot in our current lifetime, where people of different races and cultures have had to struggle to overcome various biases and so forth. And then, of course, you get this idea of finding your roots. That was, I can remember that back when I was a teenager. That became a big deal for people to find their roots and their true identity, as though their roots had to do with their true identity. Our true identity goes back to Brahman or to Shiva, depending on how you want to say it. It doesn't go back to our DNA and our ancestral Eve, or our the paternal connections that we can find through DNA analysis. But that can be interesting and fun, but it really doesn't have anything to do with our true identity. Whether we have a bigger percentage of inheritance from this country or that country is neither really here nor there. It's just kind of interesting. But this is things that we get hung up on, and that we and of course, when you're dealing with people, you feel more comfortable with people that you're more similar with, and so there's a natural feeling of being more comfortable around people of your own type. And that's perfectly natural, but that's not something to be proud of or arrogant about or hateful of others, which of course seems to be becoming more and more popular these days, is to see how many people you can hate. I don't know, it just seems it's very disturbing that people are going in the opposite direction the last few years. It seems like we've made so much progress in the past of overcoming all these things, and now it seems like there's kind of a backlash. But that's one of these fetters that we have to get over, and whether the whole society is getting over it or not is of secondary importance. Our main goal is to make sure that we're getting over it. And then concern over proper conduct. Again, that a lot of people can waste a lot of time trying to keep up with the Joneses, or wondering what it would look like to the neighbors if they did such and such. I can certainly remember when I was a kid, people went to church because that was what you were supposed to do. And if you didn't go to church on Sunday, if you were caught just staying home, people wondered what kind of a person you were because you weren't in church. So that is long gone. That has faded a long time ago. But this is the kind of things that we have concern over proper conduct. There's a comic opera by Offenbach called Orpheus in the Underworld, and one of the characters is public opinion. They personified public opinion as a character that had control over some of the other characters in the operetta. Yeah, all right, so let's go on to the next one. I'm figuring we'll probably just finish chapter 1. So if we finish a little early or a little late, doesn't really matter. Oh, I guess we did. Let's see. Which passage is this?
You did know God and all fetters will be loosened.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Let's see here. Trying to figure out where these notes tie in. Headers. All right, I'm looking for the term klesha. Where does the term klesha come?
Google it? You want me to Google it?
No, I'm just looking for it in these shlokas here, so it's got to be here somewhere. So it should be in 12, and I don't see it. All right. Anyway, there's some other things which called the kleshas, which are also obstacles, and they're ignorance, the sense of ego, attraction, aversion, and habituation. So we fall into habits and we don't think about what we're doing. Of course, again, aversions and attractions occupy our mind, and it's our ego sense and our ignorance of our true nature that is the cause of all these problems. So these are, again, considered some of these obstacles to our realization of who we really are. All right, so going on to 12, the truth is that you are always united with the Lord, but you must know this. Nothing further is there to know. Meditate and you will realize that mind, matter, and Maya, the power which unites mind and matter, are but three aspects of Brahman, the one reality. So again, Swami Prabhupada is sticking to his translation of mind, matter, and Maya as the three, but I think it's a little clearer to think of it as the separation as subject, object, and the process of knowing. It's probably a little bit closer to the actual sense from this particular tradition as what this triad is. Okay, here's another translation. Truly, there is nothing beyond this to be known. By knowing the enjoyer, the object of enjoyment, and the mover of all, or the energy that connects them, everything has been said. This is the threefold Brahman. So Brahman, they keep reminding us, is really one, but there are these three aspects that have manifested from Brahman, from this power. And in Shaivism, Shiva actually has the power to create. So it's very much like the Shaktra tradition, where the divine mother becomes all of this. And so it's closer to that tradition than, say, Advaita Vedanta. But as we've mentioned, Sri Ramakrishna tends to blend those two and really harmonizes them into kind of one understanding. And so in this particular sense, we see that, of course, once you've realized Brahman, you know all things. You don't have to know a lot of particular things. You already have come to know everything in its true essence. And this is why the great souls that have experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi have been able to accomplish so much in their lives. And that's why they can gain some yogic powers, but if they have the power to contain those and not get distracted by them. So So let's see, do I need to say anything else about this? I should have connected my notes better so that I'm not running back and forth here. Anyway, so I think this really kind of just sums up what they've already said in the previous one. So let's go on to 13, which is going on into a slightly different topic. And getting into the spiritual practice. How do you do this? We've been told over and over again that Brahman is one, Shiva is the one. There's a personal aspect to this oneness. And then we are also this oneness. We are the same consciousness of this oneness, but we are in ignorance of being this consciousness. And so the goal is to remove this ignorance. So it's fine to keep telling us that we need to do that, but how do you do it? It'd be nice to know. If that's the goal, please tell us what it is we're supposed to do. All right, so in 13, it says, fire, though present in the fire sticks, is not perceived until one stick is rubbed against another. So it's liking the self to this fire because we've been saying that our true nature is Brahman. And so Brahman is in us, but we don't see it. So it's hidden in us. Similarly, fire is mysteriously hidden in the stick. How do you get it out? It says the self is like that fire. It is realized in the body by meditation on the sacred syllable Om. And going on to 14, let your body be the stick that is rubbed, and the sacred syllable Om, the stick that is rubbed against it. Thus you shall realize God, who is hidden within the body as the fire is hidden within the wood. So I'll read another translation. As the form of fire, when latent in its source, meaning like a piece of wood, is not seen. We don't see fire just sitting in a log or a stick. And yet its seed is not destroyed, the seed of being able to create the fire, but may be seized again and again in its source by meaning of the drill. That refers to the process that many cultures would use of turning the stick back and forth on another piece of wood until it started to ignite. And of course, you can start the fire on another piece of wood and save the original stick for future use. You don't have to throw it away. So it can be seized again and again and create fire out of many pieces of wood. So it is in both cases. The self has to be seized by the body by means of the syllable Om. And of course, seized is not a terrific translation here. It has the sense of being grasped, but of course, we often use the word grasp to know. When you grasp a subject, you know the subject. And so the idea here is that when you apply this process of repeating Om and finding that divine spark within yourself, finding the divinity within yourself, then why am I losing my place here? Then you find that divinity within yourself with this process of repeating the sacred syllable Om. And so he's going to give a couple of other analogies here. And in the Prabhavananda translation, it says, like oil in sesame seeds, or butter in cream, or water in the riverbed, fire in tinder, the self dwells within the soul. Realize him through truthfulness and meditation. And and 16 says, like butter and cream is the self in everything. Knowledge of the self is gained through meditation. The self is Brahman. By Brahman is all ignorance destroyed. And reading another translation, by making one's body the lower friction stick and the syllable Om the upper friction stick, By the process of meditation on one may see God hidden, as it were, as oil in sesame seed or butter in cream, as water in a dry riverbed, or fire in the friction sticks. So is the self seized in one's own soul, if one looks for him with truthfulness and austerity. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Grasp. Yeah, grasp means to know. So we're grasping the true essence of the self. That's where that sentence was supposed to go. So it's not that we're grasping or holding on to something, but we are understanding in the deepest sense of understanding and knowing. Just like when you really feel like you've grasped the essence of a subject, you say you've grasped that subject. It's beyond, say, rote repetition. You know, we can all memorize something and repeat it. That doesn't mean we really grasp its essence or its true meaning. So it's that's what that word grasp really refers to. And then this other translation goes on, the self which pervades all things as butter is contained in milk, which is the root of self-knowledge and austerity, that is Brahman, the highest mystical doctrine. That is the highest mystical doctrine. So all of these examples are really very good. We don't see the oil in a seed. It just looks like a little round seed of some sort. But if you rub it and press it, you could get the oil out. You don't see the butter in the cream, but if you churn it, then you can get the butter out. If a river bed is dry, we can still get water if we dig a well. So all of these things require a process. We either have to rub the sticks, or we have to crush the seeds, we have to churn the cream, we have to dig a well. All of these things require effort. So that's the idea here, is that there has to be some spiritual effort. And what is that spiritual effort? It's the repeating the syllable Om, or you can generalize that to any mantra, and also meditating on the self within. And also it's going to go into the idea of meditating upon the ultimate reality in the form of a personal deity as well, meditating on Shiva from the Shaivite tradition. But again, we can generalize that to anything, because again, through the inspiration of Sri Ramakrishna, we know that all of the deities lead to that same ultimate Brahman. They all represent the ultimate Brahman. It's not just Shiva or Durga or Krishna or Rama or Jesus. All of these concepts lead to the ultimate reality. They're all symbols for that. The ultimate reality can't be grasped by the ordinary mind in an ordinary way. It has to be inferred through symbols and metaphors and stories. And so we need to go through some sort of meditation process in order to bring out our true essence that's hidden. And again, it's emphasizing that it's in everything. The self is in everything. It's not just the self in you, but once you discover the true self in you, you will see that true self in everything. That's what Sri Ramakrishna would call the Vijnani state. So, as we mentioned last time, you go up the stairs to the roof saying, not this, not this, not this, with each step, until you get to the roof and you say, I finally reached the roof. I've reached the summit. I've reached the goal. And then you look down and you see that everything is the same as the roof. The roof is made of the same material as all the steps and all the paths leading up to the steps and the house underneath you and everything. And so similarly, once the knowledge of the self is gained in meditation, you're realizing the self in everything. Just as any of these things are hidden in their objects, like the butter's hidden in the cream, the oil's hidden in the sesame seeds, Brahman is hidden in everything, in the entire universe, or the Divine Mother's hidden in everything, or Shiva's hidden in everything. And so in order to realize God, we have to control our senses and harness the mind through meditation. That's what we're going to do. Now, we can talk a little bit about Om. We've got just a few minutes left. And so we can talk about this idea of Om. All right, let's see, gone through all of this. All right, so there are lots of ways that you can think of Om. It's, of course, what we call a seed word or bija word. And the idea is that, which again, we're going to come into in later parts of this Upanishad, is that the universe has a vibrational nature to it. And so sound is a symbol for this creation, for this vibrational creation. And because sound is a symbol for this creation, we can have certain seed words or bija words, bija mantras, which represent certain aspects of this creation. And Om is the Mahabija, or the great seed word, which encompasses everything, not just one individual aspect of the creation, but it encompasses everything. And so one way to think of it as is that it encompasses all the range of sounds possible by the human voice. The ah is way in the back throat. Oo is more in the middle of the mouth. The vibration is more in the whole mouth cavity rather than back in the throat. And then the is in the lips. So you've got from the back of the throat to the middle of the mouth to the lips. And then you have the silence, which represents the true bija word, the true essence, that which is not yet manifest. And so it almost goes backwards. It almost should be wah, if you're getting into the manifest. But we want to go back to the source. So we say Om. But the creative process probably went the other way. It went from the bija of the unmanifest silence to a humming, to the oo and the ah. And so we have the manifest world coming out. So we have to trace that back and go backwards and say Om. So that's one way of thinking of it. Another way is to think of it as the three aspects of the Godhead that in Hinduism are frequently looked at as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but it doesn't have to be personified in that particular way. It's simply creation, preservation, and destruction. And of course, a Shaivite sees all of those things in Shiva or Hara, or the manifest, or the personal God in the form of Shiva. And a Shakta would see it in terms of the Divine Mother, that she is the source of all creation, and she preserves the creation, and she dissolves it in the end. So you have the same idea. Doesn't matter which deity representation you choose. So those are two ways of looking at it. Another way is to think of it as our states of consciousness. So we can think of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. And so, and that which is beyond dreamless sleep, which would be the silence in between. And so that's another way of thinking it. Again, so the ah would represent the waking state, the oo would be the dreaming state, and would be the dreamless sleep, and the silence in between is that the source of all. So all of these different ways have been spoken of in other scriptures, and they all have their particular usefulness. And the basic idea is really the same, in that the Om represents the source of the creation, the source of all things. And so it doesn't really matter which one you pick. But it's nice to remember that when we're chanting. So when we do our chanting of Om, we can remember that we're tracing our current situation in the manifest universe back to its source of the primordial seed. And we are connecting back to the primordial seed within ourselves through this vibrational process of this pure vibration. Now, of course, there are many other bija words, which we're not going to go into in detail, but there are bijas for each of the deities. And if you do any kind of tantric meditation, you might be doing bijas at various chakras and so forth. There are lots of different bijas, but the Maha Bija or the Great Bija is Om. Now, there's another interesting thing about this particular analogy, especially the one of the rubbing the sticks together and getting a flame, is that it represents a sudden bursting forth of light. And that's what we're told enlightenment is like. It's a sudden burst of enlightenment. And so just like the fire suddenly bursts forth from the stick, knowledge of the self can suddenly burst forth from our meditative state. And so that's another way of remembering this nice analogy of the fire coming from rubbing the two sticks together. So again, you can just think in that way too, as you meditate on Om, whether we're repeating it out loud or silently, and it's part of all of our mantras that are given in our particular tradition. You can remember that it's creating a vibration or a friction that will eventually bring out that enlightenment in a sudden burst of because it's potential in there. All we need to do is release it. We need to release the knowledge of Brahman within ourselves so that we can become all-knowing and not just partially knowing. All right, so I'm going to make one other comment just about Christmas. And as the Christmas season approaches, of course, we all believe in enjoying life to a certain extent, and so did Svetasvatara. His idea was that even though ultimately we want to get beyond the world and that the things in the world are only temporary manifestations of the one divine, and we're going to go beyond that, it's not world denying and saying everything is terrible. And of course, Vivekananda and others in our tradition had fun. They weren't always, they didn't always have sour faces and so forth. So enjoy the holidays. But also in our meditations, one nice thing to do is to picture yourself, just like we might do with the gospel. We might picture ourselves in a particular scene in the gospel, and picture that we're listening to Sri Ramakrishna, or perhaps we're in the service of Holy Mother, or we're traveling with Vivekananda, listening to his lectures. We can do kind of an active imagination. You can do that with Christmas too. Well, it's good we're ending this. My battery's running out. You can picture yourself. Maybe you can identify with a shepherd, or with one of the wise men, or with Joseph or Mary, and picture yourself in the particular Christmas scene. So we'll close with a chant, and I wish you happy holidays. And if there's anybody that hasn't seen this, we can do it again on Saturday, but I have a feeling almost everybody has already seen it. So we may skip it. Whoops.
Well, could you